Okay, welcome everyone. Please sit down. So thank you for attending this full council meeting tonight. And I must just start by alerting you to the emergency evacuation procedure, which is currently being displayed on the screen. If anybody needs this explained to them, please let us know. I now must go on to talk about the conduct in the Chamber. As Lord Mayor, I am given the responsibility to run this meeting in an orderly and respectful manner on behalf of full council. It is, of course, absolutely appropriate for members of the public to be able to attend and observe the meeting, as well as engaging through questions and statements and petitions. This is a chamber in which a variety of opinions and views about issues will be held and expressed, and rightly so. Can I please just remind everyone here today that I do expect that everyone here will behave and show due courtesy, tolerance and respect for one another's views, and will conduct themselves in a reasonable way. Thank you. I'd also like to welcome anyone who's attending for the first time. It's great to have you here, and I do hope, whilst you may be here for challenging reasons, perhaps, I do hope you get something out of it and have the experience of being here. So thank you for attending and engaging in democracy. So we move on to apologies for absence, and we've received the following apologies from councillors. So we have apologies from Councillor Davies, Holland, Massey, Khan, Cheney and Brain. Are there any other apologies? Okay.
Sorry, Councillor Pearce as well.
Sorry.
Steve.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hickman as well, please.
Thank you. Noted. So we move on to agenda item 3, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. So I will move the minutes of the meeting held at full council on the 17th of July this year as a correct record. There is a small correction, however, in the attendance list, giving that Councillor Steve Smith should be shown as present. Do I have a seconder for the minutes with that adjustment, please?
Yep, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Denyer. So can I take that the minutes are agreed? Thank you. The next item of business is agenda item number 4, declarations of interest. Can I ask, please, whether any councillors have any interest to declare regarding the items on today's agenda? Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to disclose an interest which is not a disclosable pecuniary interest in a motion in my name, send. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Okay, moving on to Lord Mayor's business, and sadly, we have received news that during August, Alderman Pat Roberts has passed away. Alderman Roberts served as a Bristol City Councillor between 1988 and 2005. During this time, she co-founded and chaired the Bristol Tourism and Conference Bureau, while also serving as chair of the Swimming Strategy Working Group, chair of the Arts Subcommittee, vice chair of South West Tourism, and vice chair of the Public Safety and Protection Committee. Alderman Roberts also served on a wide range of committees, including the Licensing Committee, the Women's Committee, the Leisure Services Committee, and the Downs Committee. We will shortly observe a minute's silence, but can I please now ask Councillor Paul Smith to speak in memory of Pat Roberts?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I knew Pat very well because she was from the golden age of this council. She, in fact, came on which was the best year ever for the Intake Council, 1988, which, of course, when I was elected. And then served on the council for 17 years, firstly for Noel Ward and then for Avonmouth. And I think anybody who knew Pat would know that she was a very much a Scouser within the council. I'm glad that pleases you. But she also, I think, considered herself to be a Bristolian as well. Pat worked as a social worker with older people, and that was quite a useful skill to bring to the council, given the demographic of councillors at that time. And she always was a really, really strong presence within the council. You wouldn't be in a meeting with Pat and not know she was there. She always had quite a lot to say. She said it quite forcefully and with a great deal of feeling. And we often hear in this chamber when we do these things, and I do get worried since I came on the same year as Pat about when you'll be doing it for me. Held their own views. They weren't just beholders to the party whip. They weren't just political machine animals. And Pat was somebody who had very individualistic views. I remember, I think the first time she really stood out was when there was the proposal to privatise Bristol Docks. And Pat, coming from a docking background, fought strongly against the rest of the Labour group and the Bristol Labour Party at the time to stop the docks being privatised. And she was pretty much, it has to be said, a lone voice within the council on that issue at that time. Later on, she played a very key role and a role she loved in the South West Tourism Forum. And one of her, sometimes when you talk about tourism, people talk about things that we talked about last week, or they'll talk about the suspension bridge or the docks and the wonderful facilities we have here. And of course, Pat did talk about those things. But the real issue she was really concerned about was the facilities for coach drivers. And, would there be appropriate coach parks with all the facilities that would be needed? And it was something that, hardly a meeting of the Labour group went on without some way Pat managing to get the issue of parking for coaches coming into the city into the debate. And, Pat was a great promoter of the city. She loved this city. In fact, probably, those of us who grew up here sort of take it for granted a bit, but because Pat came here from outside, she chose to come and live in Bristol. She was an amazing advocate for the city. I think she was also somebody who was very feisty. Those of you who would have worked with her know that, her views she held very strongly. She spoke with great passion within this chamber and within a committee. And even if you were in a phone booth with her, you would certainly get the force of that passion. And she was, into all that she did, absolutely dedicated both to the wards that she represented and to this city. And I think she's somebody that we'll all miss a great deal. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much for that tribute and insight. And now I believe Councillor Eddy also has a few words to say.
My Lord Mayor, I got to know Pat Roberts well during my second stint as a councillor from 1999 until she retired in 2005. As well as serving her constituents well, Pat made a huge contribution to Bristol, as Paul has indicated, including its arts, culture, tourism and leisure. She was Labour lead on my scrutiny commission in the early noughties, and I was the Tory member of the swimming strategy working group, which she very ably chaired. Pat came from that generation of politicians who said what they meant and did what they said. She was certainly robust, but always fair and unfailingly straightforward. Similar to the late Ron Stone, Pat had a great fondness for animals, and outside the council chamber, she always seemed to be entering her cats for national competitions. I suspect the blue rosettes around her home did not reflect her innate political allegiance. Pat was a great public servant for Bristol and her constituents in Newell and Avonmouth. Our fondest condolences must go to Ellen, her husband, and her family.
Thank you. And Councillor Hopkins, you also have a few words.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I knew Pat quite well because we worked together on several areas. She certainly was very clear in her views, but they were sensibly thought through. She wasn't just mouthing off. She had thought things through, and she was very well worthwhile listening to. She quite often found herself actually with ourselves in this party on a number of issues. When the Iraq war was going on, didn't endear herself to some of the Blairites at that time, I don't think. She was very much on the left wing of the party. She was very progressive when it came to environmental matters, and we were very glad to have her support when it wasn't always fashionable from other members in her party. She worked extremely hard on a swimming strategy, and again, her views were sensibly and logically thought through. So we could do with a few more Pat Roberts. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those tributes, and it's been a real insight into a councillor that I did not know, and clearly a very inspirational and passionate councillor, so lots to learn there and to keep the memory and legacy alive. So now we will have a minute's silence, so if I could ask everyone to stand, please. Thank you. And just to complete Lord Mayor's business, I've been asked to note that the Mayor may have to leave a little earlier tonight because he is a family man, as we all know, and may have to go and visit secondary schools for his son. So please, if he does leave, please excuse him for that matter. So we now move into the meat of the agenda and we go to the public forum, for which we will have approximately 45 minutes on this item, around 30 minutes for petitions and statements and 15 minutes for questions. So we will start with petitions. Each petitioner has up to 1 minute to present their petition. So bearing in mind that members would have read and are aware of the petition, so you can add something else that perhaps you haven't written. So we're going to work through as follows. We go to the first petition from Angela Mosley, and apologies in advance if I pronounce anyone's name wrong. And this is regarding parking charges around churches. Is Angela here? Great, thank you. We'll get a microphone over to you.
I'm Angela and I'm representing the local churches of Bristol, which are affected by the recent changes to parking restrictions. I go to Woodlands Church near the BBC on Whitelivers Road, but I know that this is also a live issue for many other centrally located churches. Churches are community gathering places which cross barriers of age, income, advantage, ability and education. Those who come have the chance to share life together in a way which is really valuable in today's society. These people in churches all share the vision to see our city flourish and to help and love their neighbour. They work hard in many of the same areas as you here in the council. We engage with people with all kinds of issues, people who need parenting, encouragement and support, relationship and marriage guidance, debt and housing help, crisis help, people with life-controlling issues. We want access to be easy and free to anyone who finds himself in need. We want the volunteer helpers to be able to give their time without being hampered by more parking restrictions. The outworking of how to limit parking charges around churches I leave to you, but on the principle of easy and open access, we ask you to agree and help us with this as we look to partner with you in seeking the greater good of our city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela. I will just say that the petitions will be noted and written replies will be provided sometime in the very near future. So thank you again, Angela. So move on to the next petition, which is from Claire Mellor. Is Claire here? Claire? Thank you, Claire. Or also Tracy Creed. Thank you. So this is regarding special educational needs and disability.
Good evening. Please bear with me because I'm very anxious and I'm only here because I want my child's voice to be heard as the rest of the children in Bristol. A petition was launched on the Change.org website on the 18th of July and it has received over 1,305 signatures and over 100 comments from concerned parents and professionals. The petition calls for Bristol City Council to discuss the special education needs and disability funding crisis for the full council meeting. Having lost the recent judicial review regarding the proposed spending cuts of £5 million, I'm sure the Council is keen to discuss the next steps, and I look forward to today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and there will indeed be more discussion during the course of this meeting. Our final public petition is from Michael Bell, which is regarding saving the number 10 bus service. Is Michael here? Michael? No, doesn't appear to be. Okay. So that concludes the public petitions notified for this meeting. As I said, written replies will be provided in each case. Thank you. So we now move on to public statements. In terms of the procedure, I will remind members of the following. A maximum of 1 minute should be allowed for the presentation of each statement. Please do summarise, and please bear in mind that all statements were sent to councillors in advance of this meeting and so should have already been read. Okay? In dealing with these statements, I'm going to try to allow as many people as possible to speak from among those who confirm their attendance, but I will also try to ensure that as many as possible of the topics raised are covered. Please can I advise that a number of the statements received in relation to motion number 2, the SEND, contain sensitive, personal data about individuals. These statements have been sent to myself, Mayor and councillors under confidential cover, and the council will not be making details of these statements available publicly. I would just like to point out to those individuals that they need to please be aware, if they are called to present their statements, that this is a public meeting and it is also webcasted. So let's now work through these statements. Statement number 1 will be from Alex Joseph, and this concerns Guangzhou, a twin city, and ethical practices.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay? Thank you. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to raise concerns over the ethical unethical practices within our sister city, Guangzhou, and its impact on Bristol. There is overwhelming evidence that forced organ harvesting on a mass scale is taking place in our sister city, Guangzhou. Bristol Against Forced Organ Harvesting asks our City Council to seriously address this human rights violation. The Chinese state is systematically murdering prisoners of conscience for their organs. This includes mainly Falun Gong practitioners, but also Uyghurs, Tibetans, and House Christians. China brings promise of economic gain, but at what cost? Have we not learned from history? Have we not learned how to improve and uphold our universal rights? Have we not learned that money generated from slavery, forced labour, and genocide comes at a higher cost? Taking a soft stance to horrific acts against humanity may be good for business prospects on one hand, however, at what cost? Are we truly following the will of the people through this practice? This sister city relationship may set back our human rights standards hundreds of years. There are Bristol citizens of Chinese origin who cannot go back to China or visit their sister city. Their spiritual beliefs and their efforts to stand up for human rights are deemed as a threat or subverted by the Chinese state. Their universal right is not respected in their own motherland.
Thank you, Alex. The statement has been noted. Thank you very much. And now we go on to our next statement from Lana Gale, and it's regarding motion 2 again. Is Lana here?
Hi. So our journey started 5 years ago when I took custody of my nephew. I quickly identified that as well as his hearing impairment, which I was aware of, he had much more complex needs. I discovered that he also had a brain injury and severe behavioural problems as a result of his social story. I applied for an EHCP and it took 5 years to obtain. The local authority used the excuse that Jacob is not far enough behind as he could read and write. My argument was that he's a total non-starter at maths and any other subject. He also has severe vulnerability issues. I feel education-wise he's been badly let down and has been out of school for months. I've had to remove him from school to reduce his anxiety. I've lost my job as I cannot find childcare and our family is suffering. Many other families are struggling too. I've attempted to involve social services. They've removed our social workers. They say we don't need one and that other families need it more. The main reason I applied for an EHCP is that I've lost hope in him being able to be educated in a mainstream setting and I want him to attend a special school. It's also important that he's supported in the years after school. Last year I ended up on BBC Points West and strangely, once it went public, we got the EHCP straight away. With regards to finding a school, it's a minefield. We're currently looking at hospital education for September onwards and I have no idea how that will work out, but it's a start. I've been asked to look at another school setting that I consider a naughty school, but I won't institutionalise my disabled child. He's not a monster that needs taming. He's an extremely complex boy that requires specialised teaching in a specialised setting. Thanks.
Thank you, Lana, for your testimony. Thank you very much. So the next statement is from Keen Seeger, and this is regarding the change in council enforcement policy towards illegal encampments. Is Keen here? No? Okay, so we move on to the next statement from Maggie Shapland. Is Maggie here? Yes? Okay, this is Ashton Court Miniature Railway.
I'm speaking on behalf of the Bristol Industrial Archaeological Society and wish to support the railway. The Bristol Model Engineers is a 100-year-old charitable society run by volunteers. Their workmanship is outstanding. The railway was installed in 1972, 46 years ago, run by volunteers regularly and a popular tourist attraction ever since. The engineers enjoy showing their work. The engines need to be used. Visitors enjoy riding on them and pay for the privilege, a win-win situation. How can they say a successful facility in a community park does not pay for itself? The society pays rent, set by the councillors, landlords, and keeps the site scrupulously tidy. Infrastructure, track, locos provided by the society. No money sought from the council. An extra facility for visitors bringing revenue. Children come all afternoon and enthusiasts. Many volunteers to run things smoothly. Only 90 pence to have a ride. To watch costs nothing, affordable for all. A fantastic educational resource. Encourages young engineers to learn about real engineering and get valuable experience from knowledgeable engineers. The website details the work and training they do in addition. Good engineering facilities and a new workshop on site. It has its own car park and complements the pitch and putt. And I also believe that planning permission would be needed from North Sunset if the council had ideas on what to do with the site otherwise to get change of use. And it's in the curtilage of a listed building. So much is protected. How can we justify the loss of such a wonderful tourist attraction? There is no other miniature railway in Bristol.
Thank you, Maggie. And now, is Claire Mellor here? Claire? No? So now, Michael Bruzin.
Hello, my name is Mike Brucine. I'm representing the Bishop Simon St Andrews Traffic and Parking Group. We have submitted a report to the council, a scoping report showing overwhelming evidence for the need for something to be done about the traffic, traffic and particularly parking in our area. We are a group of neighbours and residents from the area who have been campaigning and exploring this for some years now. We're in discussion with the traders on Gloucester Road, and we've had very helpful, I have to say, conversations with councillors here, and we hope to be starting work with some officers shortly. We believe that in the long run, an RPS, a residence parking scheme, is the only way forward for our area, and that's what we're going to be campaigning for. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Janet Seeger here? Janet? No? Okay, so David Redgewell. And this is another statement regarding the Ashton Court miniature railway, also Henbury Loop. Actually, it's a lot of different things. Toilets, graffiti. All in 1 minute, please.
Invest in those stations and bring some systems properly with the that railway goes forward in the next 2 to 3 years. We don't have a big window of opportunity there with Network Rail. We need to take that opportunity and decide what we're doing. Toilets and graffiti, right, this is the issue I want to say. Toilets need to be reviewed. I've already asked the Scrutiny Commission to do this. RMT and Unite bus drivers have asked, and passengers, because we don't have enough public toilets. Ash's Tribe and Community Toilets, we need to go back and look at this policy again. You know, there's need to review and make sure we get this right for the tourism, for the residents, for everybody that uses the city. Toilets are very important. We're the only part of the southwest that doesn't have public toilets, and we need to make sure these are available. On graffiti, I want to say thanks to the Mayor for it's going on, but we need to do more in terms of tagging, more in terms of enforcement, and more in terms of actually taking them to court. I welcome the work this week with Kai and Kingdom, taking them on to graffiti. The tagging needs to stop. We need to get this city right and clean for the people of Bristol. We cannot go on tagging trains, buses, bus shops, and costing the City Council millions of pounds every year. Thank you.
Thank you. And only 17 seconds over. That was impressive. Well done. Right. So now is Anne Pepper here? Anne Pepper? No? Fiona Castle? Okay, great. So Fiona has another statement on special educational needs and disability.
Thank you. My 7-year-old son was diagnosed with autism when he was 4 and is now in a mainstream Bristol primary school. During the diagnosis process, we submitted an application for a needs assessment for an HCP, which was rejected. Despite difficulties with potty training, we were denied access to portage. As a Bristol child, his nursery should have had access to the inclusion team, but it didn't because it was in South Gloucestershire. Since starting school, we've twice been told my son is eligible for top-up funding, only to have the funding cut to such a degree as to not make it worth the school applying. In the last academic year, we spent £300 of our son's disability living allowance on resources for the school. Otherwise, my son would not have been able to have these resources. My son has a significant language delay and problems with short-term memory. He's not able to access the curriculum without extra support. However, we are consistently told not to reapply for a needs assessment because he's not severe enough. It appears that in Bristol there is very little support for children like my son. What support there has been significantly cut by Bristol City Council. This is a heartbreaking and immoral position for my family to be put in by the council, and in no way does it promote my son's chances of fulfilling his potential.
Thank you, Fiona. And we have another statement from Sally Kent. Sally here. Okay.
Is it working? Like my friend here, I'm quite nervous as well. It's the first time I've spoken in public, so please bear with me. We welcome the recent judicial review judgment. However, there are still many serious unanswered questions. Why was the SEM budget reduction not included in the Mayor's big decision, Tough Choices consultation? How can Councillor Keane claim not to have known that full consultation and equality impact assessments were required for the reduction of £5 million on a statutory service after the big decision, Tough Choices consultation has recently taken place? Why was the £5 million reduction effectively hidden from councillors in the budget papers? Will the Mayor now order a transparent and thorough investigation so we can understand what led to the council being subject to judicial review and give confidence to parents of children and young people with SEND in Bristol that this will not happen again? We would also like to remind the Mayor that we are watching and will not hesitate to initiate further legal action if any further attempts are made to reduce the budget of this already insufficient service. Thank you.
Thank you. So is John Burgess here? John? No? Julie Boston, you're here. Public Services.
I've got... Okay, right. Well, I very much welcome the Mayor's decision on the arena, but surely that means there will be some money to restore the public services, which are tragically now lacking. Number one is reopening all the public lavatories. The second one is to restore the in-house people who, maintain our parks and our open spaces. Of course, we're keeping the libraries as paid staff. No volunteer. Don't speak volunteer. What else are we doing? Sports. What's happened to that wonderful boxing group in South Bristol that have been forced to move to another bit of Bristol, which is not good for young people once they're used to going to whatever one they used to go to. Come on, what else am I doing? Noel West, yeah. Now, and what are you doing with Philwood? Philwood has been battered for the past 50 years. It used to have the biggest statement, well, letting me go on forever. Philwood used to have an Olympic swimming pool. Now their wonderful public library, their only bit of humanity in Philwood, is threatened with closure.
That's a lot, Julie. Thank you. if I'm allowed to say, Fulwood does have a community centre, and they have a very good event coming up on the 22nd that I encourage everyone to attend. Okay, so we go to Varun Patel. I don't know what your topic is, but you're going to say something, I'm sure.
It's a general topic. It's unbelievable that the Labour backbenchers and Jeremy Corbyn and left-wing socialites sitting on their allotment purchase whilst this chamber is only scrutinising people are the Conservatives and the Lib Dems. There's been zero transparency on Bristol Energy, Bristol Waste, Bristol Housing Company and Bristol Arena. 0, 0, 0. The councillors get paid £10,000 a year for not supporting their wards and holding to account this administration on its statutory duties, and statutory duties. The mayor should be protecting the vulnerable of this city, such as disabled, survivors and children, minority groups, elderly. As a priority, I will tell you what is the waste. Is Bristol's waste of the councillors' allowances and the mayor's salary. Will they join the rest of the UK workforce in claiming universal credit? That sounds like a very cooperative way, doesn't it? Or will they build central government for Bristol's needs so that the government knows it's not doing its job under the Local Government Act or not? Thank you.
Thank you. And next statement from Oliver Fortune regarding public toilets.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Normally I come with a poem, but today I've come with a shit sandwich. I'd like to start by thanking the current administration for everything that they've done with regards to housing and keeping all but one library, so only closing one library, keeping the rest of them open. I think that is brilliant in these really difficult times. So I would like to start by thanking them for that. However, as Julie pointed out before, the public toilets being closed is a real bone of contention for many people in the city, most of all the homeless. Now, the council secured private toilet provision with many companies around the city. However, I've spoken to homeless people, and a lot of them are denied entry into the places that the council have secured an arrangement with. So I think with immediate effect, I call upon councillors who agree with this that we need to have a debate on reopening the toilets. I ask you to bring it to the next full council as a motion so that we can get the toilets reopened. And I think it's something that will potentially cost Labour winning seats in the next local election. I think you really need to get it reopened.
Thank you. So the next person is John Howley. Is John here? No? So Max Langer. Max? Okay, good.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm here basically to point out what I see as a worrying trend in this council, that too often decisions are being made within these walls and not out in the communities who should be making them. This started with the neighbourhood partnerships, which were shut down and replaced with a less effective and less powerful organisation. Then we had the library consultation, where people were given 3 options, all of them bad, and with some communities not being able to save their own libraries. Then we had the arena decision, where this entire council voted to have it at Temple Meads, which was then ignored the next day. And then today we have SEND and the provision for people with special educational needs. They had no consultation, no equality impact assessment, and it wasn't even included in the budget papers. I call on all councillors to vote for that motion and to actually start making decisions with communities. Scrutiny is not an easy process, but it does lead to better decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Mike Henry here? Nick Lloyd? Okay, so we move to Robbie Gillett or Gillette, or neither of the two? Robbie? And this is concerning fracking.
Thanks very much. It's Gillett, but it doesn't matter. Last Saturday, 8th of September, over 300 people gathered outside on College Green for the Rise for Climate rally, calling for renewable energy, climate jobs, clean air, 20-mile-per-hour speed limits, and for the Avon Pension Fund to divest from fracking companies and other fossil fuel companies. And it was great to see some councillors in the chamber here were also at that rally last Saturday. Now, however, central government is proposing to remove the power of local authorities to hear planning applications and decide on planning applications for exploratory fracking drilling by fracking companies. These drilling operations instead will be considered as permitted development, the same as putting up a garden shed in your back garden. So we appreciate that whilst Bristol Council itself is unlikely to have fracking within its jurisdiction, although Somerset might, nonetheless, regardless of your views on fracking, the right of local councils, and more importantly of local people, to have a democratic channel to air their views about how they may be impacted by fracking is really important. So we, the organisers of last Saturday's rally for Rise for Climate rally, ask that all councillors in Bristol and also the West of England Combined Authority write to central government objecting to these changes to the planning laws as they constitute an attack on local democracy and the rights of local communities to decide.
Thank you, Robbie. Okay, a few more statements to go. Do we have Barry Cash? Barry?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to congratulate Mayor Rees on his decision not to build the arena on Temple Island. It would have been easier to go with the crowd, and I commend his moral courage and leadership in making a different choice. Personally, I believe a city centre arena without car parking would have been a loss-making white elephant. However, this leaves a site which has been empty for years, likely to remain empty for another 5 years at least. Meanwhile, hundreds of Bristol families have nowhere, literally nowhere, to call home. Please use this empty land to quickly erect modular homes to provide emergency accommodation for homeless families until it is needed for the new development. If modular homes are too expensive, you can get second-hand caravans from holiday parks for about £500 each. It would not be luxury, but it would provide somewhere for a family to call home while they sort their lives out. If you can't or won't do that, at least turn it into a car park and raise some money for the council while the planning goes on. Please, as Winston Churchill used to say, action this day. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Right, trying to work through a few more. Do we have Sue Elstob here? Or Ruth Snarry? Okay, so now we're going to go to Daniel Balla. Is Daniel here? And this is a statement regarding Hamilton House on Stokes Croft.
Thank you. We're certain that many of you will be aware of the unfolding situation at Hamilton House and Stokes Croft and the very likely danger that the majority of community services and initiatives will be lost if nothing is done to check the actions of the owners, Connolly and Callaghan. In the year leading to this point, under Coex's stewardship, Hamilton House accommodated over 500 artists, social enterprises and businesses, subsidised nearly £110,000 in free space and supported disadvantaged groups, provided over 1,260 employment opportunities amongst all of the initiatives based there. And it's safe to say that it is a much needed and much loved project. I won't go through the nuts and bolts of the statement, you have it all. What I will say is I do urge you, councillors, to read it and to take action. We, in particular, the representatives here that do have direct communication with CNC, we ask you to put pressure on the company to revisit their decision and to find a way to continue to facilitate Coexist to hold the lead tenancy in the building. CNC should deliver a 10-year lease to safeguard the project and allow Coexist to make the necessary steps to meet CNC's rent demands. We're aware that CNC currently hold contracts with Bristol City Council worth in the region of £4.5 million for emergency housing across the wards of Bristol. As a council, we believe that there is a responsibility to work with companies that prioritise community in their decision-making, are transparent and authentic in their actions, and we're hopeful that with pressure and guidance from local councillors, C&C will be able to find a way to make their decision one that prioritises communities over profits. Please do take action on this soon, because we only have until the end of the month before C&C are likely to end the contract with Coexist and potentially begin the loss of services in Stokes Croft.
Okay, I'm going to try and get two more statements in. So we have Ornella Sabine. Sorry if I've pronounced your surname wrong. And this is regarding council budgets.
Hello? Right, I'm absolutely outraged that 2 million will be spent on security by this council, while local services have been slashed. Truly needed services for our most vulnerable people have been cut by the blink of an eye. Cuts to the Bush Disabled Unit, Host Springs, libraries, public toilets, school crossing patrols, cuts in SEND, mental health. All these are small pots of money that have had devastating consequences on families in this city who are told that better services would be provided, adding insult to injury. Bristolians clearly see money squandered on white elephants, such as now the aborted arena, where a bridge for 10 million was spent, and I think it came to something more, nearly £100 million in the last 12 years, on a pile of mud. The Colston Hall, the council has still not bothered to change the name. The Metro bus, all the fuss and pomp and ripping down of trees. Don't we need trees for air quality? What was that all about? It's just another bus. 2 million on security. What are you protecting yourselves from? A couple of banners that say cuts kill.
Thank you. And now we'll have our final statement, which is from Maddie Williams on behalf of Acorn. Is Maddie here?
Hello. Good evening. This is in reference to 2 survivors of domestic abuse who are now facing homelessness and destitution following the closure of a safe house in Bristol. We call on the council to urgently address the housing situation for vulnerable women following the closure of 2 of the within safe hands safe houses in Bristol, and also to review this inappropriate provision. Bristol City Council has obligations to house victims of domestic abuse and to ensure that the Commission support services that women are referred into are providing appropriate support. However, in this situation, already vulnerable women and their children have been subjected to further abuse within a supposedly safe house, and upon its closure are being made destitute and homeless rather than rehoused and given ongoing support. You already have the statement, so I will move on to some demands. We demand that the council, as a matter of urgency, and by the latest on 5 p.m. on Thursday, 13th of September, rehouse these women under Band 1 status, which they are entitled to, reinstate their ability to use the Home Choice Bristol allocation scheme, reinstate their benefits payments and backdate unpaid payments, formal confirmation of the erasure and closure of housing benefit debt and the investigation of 1 survivor, for the council to honour its commitment in the Safer Bristol commissioning strategy, authored by the Crime Reduction Team in June 2014, to provide core services, for the council to acknowledge its responsibility to rehouse women made homeless following the closure of a safe house, for the council to undertake a thorough investigation into how the organisation within Safe Hands was able to run a so-called safe house without appropriate checks on staff, for example, an enhanced DBS checks on volunteers. Ensure survivors in other within Safe Hands property are also rehoused and get appropriate ongoing support. Ensure that all future commissioned safe houses and refuges for survivors of domestic abuse meet the Women's Aid National Quality Standards. And finally, implement thorough contingency plans in the event of a closure or renovation of a safe house to ensure people are rehoused appropriately and in a timely manner.
Thank you for your statement, and thank you to...
Can we just say we've only had 3 statements on send, and there's one more parent left with just one statement to say, and it's very important that a position is heard. Can we...
I was just going to say, is there anyone else who's here who didn't get a chance to read their statement?
Thank you.
So this will be the final statement. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Smith, and I'd like to start off by saying what a complete irony I got missed off despite the fact that they knew today that I was going to make a statement. I'm here tonight for 2 reasons, and those reasons are my son and my daughter. You should have read my statement by now. It talks about how Bristol City Council failed to fairly administer my EHC needs assessment request for my son in 2016. The flagrant disregard for the request came at great cost, the cost of his education and the cost of his mental well-being. He is just one child in Bristol with disabilities who has failed because of your SEND team's slapdash manner and complete disregard for the law and children with SEND in this city. It also addresses how when I applied for my severely dyslexic daughter in August this year, the request went missing despite Bristol City Council safely receiving it. From my experiences, and tonight actually, council staff are poorly informed, poorly trained, appear not to follow legal guidelines, and have an arbitrary threshold for agreeing to assess. It's an absolute disgrace. Bristol City Council is not failing children in the city, it has failed them, and it continues to fail them now.
Thank you. So that concludes the statements received from members of the public in the allotted time that we have. Council is asked to receive and note these statements, which I also refer to the Mayor for his consideration and for his information. So now we're going to move on to public questions. And again, we will try to get through as many as we can within our time. Please note that the questions have been circulated and will also be displayed on the screen, so there is no need for questioners to read out their questions. The Mayor or the relevant Cabinet member will reply verbally to the questions, and each questioner will then be allowed to ask a supplementary question if they wish to. So we're going to start, and we start again with Alex Joseph, who has a question which follows on from his statement earlier. So I think the Mayor is going to reply, and then you'll be able to ask your supplementary if you wish.
Okay, thank you for your question. In terms of how we'll address the issue with Guangzhou, this is something we've been aware of because obviously there's been an ongoing campaign in Bristol, but working with our international team, the view is, in terms of the scale of the impact we may have, is that the best approach we can take is actually to work with the national government on this and our Foreign Office, and this is an issue they obviously monitor. We do have a sister relationship with Guangzhou. Obviously, this is built around our cultural connections, investment and trade, as you've pointed out, but we're thinking about what impact and effect can we have. In terms of your second question, on the basis of that, that your request that we de-twin with Guangzhou, again, this isn't something that we're intending to do right now. What we are doing is working with our national government on all these human rights issues. And it may be of interest to know that when we have the Global Parliament and Mayors here in October, one of the things we will be talking about, among other things, is how we well, it's all covered by sponsorship, but one of the things we will be talking about is how we stand up for population health across the globe and human rights with our global network of cities.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for taking the time to answer my questions. I may have missed a few parts because there was a few bits of talking while you were talking then, but I think I got the main gist of what you were saying. I think that there is some talking taking place. Thank you. I do understand that it will be dealt with on a national level, but you must understand that there are citizens of Bristol whose human rights are currently being violated. York has taken steps to improve their human rights standards. Birmingham also have taken steps to improve their relationship with Guangzhou, considering this forced organ harvesting. One issue Buffalo has is that we have never actually had a meeting with yourself, any of your team, and never actually been given any answer to any of our questions whatsoever. I respect that you're all very busy. All I ask is that this issue is dealt with in a compassionate manner and also in a professional manner. Ignoring this human rights issue is only going to make it worse, because there is a genocide taking place in China, and though you're saying it's being dealt with our national government, it doesn't excuse the fact that the Chinese Communist Party currently owns part of our city, and it's only a matter of time before they start using their influence for inhumane means. Thank you.
I just checked with the team. I'd be surprised if there's been no contact, because this is a conversation we had with the international team. From my very first trip to Guangzhou in December 16, this was an issue that came up, and I thought there had been some contact, so I'll find out what's going on. Secondly, I'd be interested to know what's going on in the other cities, particularly Birmingham, as you mentioned, because my understanding is that Birmingham has been incredibly proactive in their relationship with their sister cities in China, particularly through their university connections and their trade connections as well, and actually it's been a source of major investment for their drive on housing. So I'd be interested to hear more about the nature of that relationship that you're saying is changing.
I'd just like to ask, when will that be? You have my contact details, and when you're ready to take some time to meet with our team, we can actually discuss this. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'll talk to the international team. As I said, I'd be surprised if there'd been no contact, because I'm sure the international team told me they had, but let's find out. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Is Bob Lilly here?
Lord Mayor, thank you for the opportunity. Ashton Court Railway, the renewal of the lease. First question is about quantifying the costs incurred by Bristol Council. We don't understand that there are any costs because we do all the maintenance ourselves. And the second point is about throwing away £400,000 of Bristol assets. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. So, got some numbers here. So, when the model railway is open to the public, the council run golf courses takings drop by £230 a day compared to non-model railway days. And this is not actually offset by the rental income from the model railway. So what the council does, what we do want to do is explore the potential value from other uses of this site, which is a prime site. So all we're currently doing is identifying opportunities as a result of the expiration of the railway's lease. And this comes within a context. So many statements today have been about council spending. And one of the challenges as we face less and less money from national government is how do we maximise the revenue so that we've got revenue in our account to spend on special educational needs or housing provision and all those things that the city requires of the council. That's the challenging context in which we find ourselves, increasing need with shrinking budget, so we have to make best use of our land. As for your second question, Bob, you know, it's important to point out we haven't not yet made a decision not to renew the lease, but there are a number of issues that we need to consider. One is the land the railway line is set on is one of the few areas of Ashton Court that could be utilised to generate more revenue to fund our services. As I said, but we do want to continue discussion with you to identify if there is a better business model to retain the railway on that site. But what we're doing now would be normal action when a lease is coming to an end, where we begin to say, well, do we want to renew this lease and continue, or is there something that is better for the city as a whole, but acceptable to both partners? But if we do come to the conclusion that there's a better use of that site, we'll clearly be exploring with you the option to relocate onto an alternative site. And I think we've already identified sites in Ashton Court and actually some alternatives in other Bristol parks.
Thank you. Can I just go back on the first question there? You mentioned the loss of £230. how much money is actually raised from car parking when we have 200 or 300 cars parked there for our running day? And how much extra is raised on income at the CAF when we have large support for the CAF? We did 3,000 rides last Sunday. Thank you.
Yeah, I wouldn't have to hand the amount that's coming from the car park, but working with the team, you know, the alternatives that are being brought, that are being suggested, indicate that the revenue could be considerably more than the revenue generated by the current combination of the revenue you bring, the rent you pay, and the lost revenue that we have. And that's a very challenging situation that we have to grapple with. As I said, we haven't made a decision to not renew the lease, but we do have to look for all alternatives, including alternative sites in Ashton Court and other parts as well. You know, otherwise we wouldn't be doing our job as a local authority who has to generate more revenue as central government give us less money.
So the next question is from Paul Misen. Is Paul here? No? How about Edward Bowditch? Edward? How about Michael Owen? No? Okay. Graham Donald?
Okay, well, I won't read out my question again because it's on the board.
Okay, so we can go to the reply if you have it to hand.
Okay, so my understanding is in this situation, we lost the school crossing patrol because of long-term sickness. I think in June or July this year, we made a decision to go out to ad to backfill that post. It's been up on the web, but as yet, no one has actually applied for the position. So, I mean, what we can do in terms of driving that ad out and trying to get people to take up the post, you know, we'll do what we can. We think it's a challenging role to recruit to because it is a post that goes outside in all weathers, and it's obviously a split shift, first thing before morning and at night. But the job ad is out there, and we're doing our best to recruit to the post.
Thank you. I've seen the job advertisement. I think it's been there about 3 months now, and of course, parents in the area have been doing without a crossing patrol for a lot longer than that. Can we do something more proactive, please?
Well, we'd welcome your support with that, and welcome the support of the councillors to recruit someone to fill that post. I mean, we've put it out there. We drive it. There's getting lots of publicity today. Anyone who knows, anyone who'd be interested in a job in school crossing patrol, please let us know, and we'll take them up.
Is Charlotte Gage here? Charlotte?
I'm here on Charlotte's behalf. She can't be here today.
Okay, I think I'm going to hand this one over to you, Paul, on housing.
Yeah, thank you, Marvin. Firstly, on the first question, it's incorrect to say that any women have been made homeless. There were 5 women in the 2 houses ran by this organisation. One of them has already been rehoused by the council into social housing. The other 4 are on home choice and are at very high priority and likely to be rehoused soon, with the exception of one who is, there's technical issues that we need to deal with. We needed to come in and talk to our advice services with, presumably with Acorn support. So there are no women who have been made homeless. Whilst the organisation is in the process of closing, the housing has not gone. The women are still in that housing. There have been, following intervention of our private rented team, some improvements and repairs made to the housing. They have all been offered places in other safe houses which they have turned down. But at the moment, they are not homeless, nor have they been issued with a notice to quit.
Sorry, that was a typo. They're at risk of being made homeless and have been served with an eviction notice which had to be withdrawn for an error on the part of Within Safe Hands, but they are at risk of being homeless. And we'd like you to respond in good faith to that.
Yeah, and so, well, sorry, you didn't make clear that there was a mistake in the question. I'm sorry about that. Yes, we are actively pursuing their rehousing, as we would with any people in this situation. I think, you know, council also needs to be aware that there's a real issue with organisations setting up, pretending to provide supported facilities so that they can use the housing benefit system to get additional housing benefit, and that not being the case. This isn't the only one that our housing benefit team, when they've investigated whether there is support in place, and therefore that the organisation is entitled to the additional housing benefit, that has not been the case. And it's not the first time that we've withdrawn that. And there's a real issue. They're quite happy to talk to Acorn about when I meet them on Thursday night about the problems of landlords trying to abuse the housing benefit system and the local housing allowance system that we need to address. Now, it's only when we find out that's going on and we investigate the support that we know there's a problem. That's what happened here. So we haven't closed this down. We've withdrawn the housing benefit, which was being claimed erroneously by the landlord.
If you've known this since February, why are these women still being housed in an unsafe, unregistered safe house?
They have been offered places in other registered, because wasn't a service we commissioned, they have been offered places in other safe houses within Bristol, managed through our commission with Next Link, which they have turned down. We've ensured that those properties are properly repaired and maintained. At the moment, they have valid tenancies, but we are also actively pursuing rehousing them within the council's social housing stock.
Thank you. So we're almost at time now for our allotted allocation for questions. So I'm going to try and move on to 2, maybe 3 if we're lucky, but definitely another 2. So thank you for your question, but you've had 2 supplementaries now, and I'm afraid we have to move on.
So what about part 2 of the question to the Mayor?
The Mayor has given it over to Councillor Smith to answer.
For the investigation part, sorry.
Can just so that there will be an investigation, not into, I mean, the investigation into within Safe Hands has already happened, but I'm quite happy to sit down with Acorn and with other organisations to talk about this issue of front organisations pretending to provide supported housing and not doing that as a way of scamming the housing benefit system, and how we deal with that quickly, and how we offer support to the tenants of those organisations who are obviously being exploited.
Thank you. So the next question is from Nick Townsend. Is Nick here? Good.
Should we just launch into the answer?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Just go straight to the answer.
Thanks for your question, Nick. I'm going to ask Cabinet Member Nicola Beach to respond to your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick, for asking your question to do a consultation. I just wanted to quickly, for the benefit of all members of the public here tonight and everyone in the chamber, really, just to recap on the consultation that has actually been undertaken to date on the Urban Living SPD. So the current consultation information is on the consultation website, which is obviously was launched when the consultation started, and individuals, community groups and businesses who have all been involved in the debate were notified of the fact that the second consultation had then gone live. People who'd attended the earlier consultation workshops, which have happened throughout the year, were also notified of the fact that this information was now available, and also anybody that filled in the detailed consultation response was also notified. Personally, from my perspective, I've been on BBC Radio Bristol at 8 o'clock in the morning at the peak hour twice. Paul's filled in all sorts of blogs and, and conversations about this, and all the press have been notified through a press release. I think, you know, there has been consultation on this issue. There is debate happening on this issue. People are talking about this issue. So I'm struggling to understand what you mean by lack of consultation. I'm happy to come and meet your group. I think we're in email contact anyway. And just while I'm here, let me take this opportunity to just let everybody know that the consultation on the second phase of the Urban Living SPD closes on the 25th of September. You can email any further detailed comments at citydesigngroup@bristol.gov.uk or address to the City Design Group at the Bristol City Council, a postal address. Thanks.
Is there a follow-up question?
Yes. I mean, there was, I think, 600 replies, which I think was very poor. There was one public meeting, which was here. WAM, Windmill Hill and Malago Planning Group organised a meeting which had 50, 60 people there. Shows there's an appetite to discuss this. And there was no leaflet, there was no letter sent to residents. So I think if you went out and asked people, I'd be surprised if 1% of the Bristol's population knew about this consultation. It's a really important consultation, and I think it echoes the problem that we have with this council, that consultation is really poor.
I'll just come back to that slightly, Nick. I mean, just touching on your point about you saying writing to residents to let them know. In terms of the respondents that we had to the SPD, it can't be ignored that 37% of those people lived in Windmill Hill and Bedminster. But this is not a consultation on Bedminster Green. And I think I appreciate that in the WAM area, it's an incredibly sensitive topic at the moment. And I've done a lot of work with Bedminster, with the East Street traders, and that continues at a very local level to do with that issue. But this is a city-wide policy-making exercise. I think we have consulted widely. I think people are aware of this. It's obviously sensitive, more sensitive for some pockets of the community than others. And I'm more than happy to work more closely with WAM if you'd like. But I think that actually what you're describing is a disproportionate response to the particular issues that your particular group and the residents of Windmill Hill are currently concerned about.
Yes, we would like that, and we'll take you up on that. So,
that'd be my absolute pleasure.
Okay, thank you. That now concludes the questions, or the time we have for questions. Thank you to everyone who came to read their questions, to give supplementaries, and to get involved. Written replies will be given to everyone who submitted a question, whether they're here tonight or not. And all the questions and answers will also be on the website in due course. So we now move on to agenda item number 8, which is the petition debate. This is concerning the Ashton Court... Go backwards. There's now a petition notified by councillors, so it's agenda item 7. So we have one councillor petition which has been notified, and it is as follows. It's from Councillor Weston, and the petition is concerning no parking charges at Blaze. So I'd like to now ask Councillor Weston to present the petition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. The petition reads as follows. We, the undersigned, oppose the introduction of parking charges at Blaze Castle. We believe that it will raise little money for the council and instead push visitors to park in nearby residential roads. These already busy streets will only become more congested, especially at peak times, and were never designed to be a car park. We oppose charging at Blaze and believe that the Mayor should think again. Now, that is signed by 651 signatures online and 373 paper in my hand, which I need to present, for a total of 1,024. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Weston. So that concludes the petitions presented by members of the Council, and a written reply will be provided. I do note that several people are now leaving the chamber. Can I ask that we keep discussions to a minimum? If you want to discuss, please go outside of the chamber so that we can hear what's happening. So we move on to agenda item number 8, and this is the petition debate regarding Ashton Court Miniature Railway. So just to be clear about the procedure for this item, This petition has reached the 3,500 signature threshold to qualify for a full council debate, and 20 minutes is the maximum time allocation allowed for debate. The petition organiser will be permitted up to 5 minutes to present the petition and its objectives. We will then proceed to the councillor debate, and I will ask the Mayor or the relevant Cabinet member to respond at the end of the debate. Just to be clear, this will be a councillor debate. It is not, at this stage, an interactive debate involving the public. The issues raised in the petition and the comments of members during this debate at this meeting will be referred to the Mayor and relevant Cabinet member. The petition has been organised by the Bristol Society of Model and Experimental Engineers, and I now invite Norman Rogers to present the petition. Norman, you have up to 5 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you. Norman Rogers, Chairman of the Bristol Society of Model and Experimental Engineers, a society that was formed some 109 years ago, whose members have a wide range of interests from steam power to advanced electronics. In recent negotiations, we have been compared to commercial organisations such as the Beer Heights Railway. Modern engineering societies, such as Bristol, however, are very different. Profit is likely to be a prime motive at Beer Heights, whereas at Bristol it isn't. Another difference will be how a railway has been engineered. The Ashton Court Railway is essentially a society railway. It has not been engineered for heavy commercial operations, unlike Beer Heights Railway. Historically, societies built... Historically, societies built tracks for their members to test and run their engines. This in turn attracted a new audience, the public, who grew to love miniature railways. Our first track was in Canford Park, before moving to Ashford Court in 1973 at the invitation of the council, who gave considerable assistance with that move. Since then, we have continued to operate the site, adding assets that enhance the railway experience for the public and hobbyists alike. In brief, our success points we feel are that we are a successful public amenity providing enjoyment to successive generations of children and families. We are one of the few attractions in Bristol that people of all ages can enjoy together. We support disabled and disadvantaged groups with special days. We have massive public support, as has been seen recently. We provide a social and supportive environment for hobbyists that are retired and at risk of social isolation. We maintain the railway and its equipment to ensure public and volunteer safety. We do all the site maintenance, including the grass mowing, the tree and environment care. And yet, we have been confronted with the prospect of having to walk away from assets estimated to be worth in the region of £400,000, so that Bristol City Council can raise an additional, yet relatively small, unspecified amount of income. We are told that we do not operate with sufficient frequency, that we charge too little, and as a consequence, the return to the council is inadequate. A council statement suggests that the site does not pay its way, but on what basis has that been determined? The railway costs the council nothing, it is wholly self-supporting, and rent is paid in accordance with the formula agreed with the council. Also being ignored is the fact that the very engines that fire public interest are built by members in pursuance of their hobby. On what basis is it thought reasonable to suggest to a volunteer group that they and their assets should be wholly focused on commercial gain for a third party? We cannot and should not be ruthlessly commercial. There are limits on how much a volunteer is willing to do, just as there are limits on what visitors will spend. Relocation, as we've heard, has been suggested. We have surveyed the proposed sites and find them ill-suited with many questions unanswered. That aside, the very idea of relocation is daunting. It's not a quick van job. The Ashton Court Railway comprises of 2 tracks, bespoke buildings for the storage of carriages, engines and equipment.
Norman, you have a minute left, just to let you know.
Thank you very much. Associated transfer facilities, as well as many other railway features. Relocation would mean abandoning these assets and recreating them elsewhere. In these austere times, is the council willing to foot the bill? We think not. Given the value of those assets and the potential cost of relocation, is there any sense in moving the railway? Suddenly, this week, after months of council inaction, we are asked to agree to some conditions, including the potential loss of our car parking, so that a short-term lease can be issued. It will also be a lease that enables the council to evict the railway should a better offer be received. And why only today someone was being shown over the site. It does appear to us that being a volunteer is terribly one-sided at times. Therefore, in debating this petition, we ask the councillors to reflect on the following. We bring a unique facility to Ashton Court with social and community values. We have tremendous support from the people of Bristol, and we need a sensible long-term agreement, including an affordable rent, to secure the railway's future for the people of Bristol. Thank you.
Thank you, Norman. Invited down as Lord Mayor. So we now go to the debate, and we start with Councillor Phipps for Labour.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As has been demonstrated in the public gallery, the miniature railway is a popular attraction in Ashton Court and is a particular favourite with my grandson. It's tucked away at the top of Ashton Court and has provided pleasure for men for over 40 years. Indeed, the current position means that there's some who don't know they're up there. The other aspect of this attraction, I'm actually going to cut short some of my statement because some of the questions that I've put in here have already been answered by some of the debate that we've already had. But one of the things I'd like to say is the other aspect of this attraction is that it's run by volunteers. This highlights the value of volunteering, not only as a way of participating in something that's really good fun, but also clearly shows that volunteers can make a real difference in the delivery of activities for others to enjoy. Volunteers have the opportunity to use skills which they can pass on to others, and we seek to encourage this. There is a commitment from the Council to explore opportunities to allow the railway to continue. However, we do face challenging financial times at present and seek to ensure that all organisations and businesses and groups who use the parks and green spaces make a fair contribution to the cost. I understand that this is difficult for some, but there's a real willingness to negotiate a new business model and to look at some new leasing arrangements and potentially other sites. I really hope that we can work together to ensure that the miniature railway is retained and that we can keep active negotiations and open conversations until a resolution is found. And I've offered to be part of this process.
Thank you. And now we have Councillor Morris for the Conservative Party.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I stand to speak as someone who has had great enjoyment from the railway over many years. I'd like to congratulate the work of the Bristol Society of Model and Experimental Engineers. The petition has gained so much traction in such a short space of time. And that, to me... No, I've cut out most of the puns, honest. But if you haven't been to the site, I would urge every member here to go and visit it. You won't believe what a team of volunteers has done to that site over a very short, well, over years, but the platform, the bridges, the points, the signal boxes and the tunnels, they have done that work themselves without any support from the council. They maintain the site themselves, as Norman has already said. That saves the council money. And it's a testament to the strength of feeling as to the number of people that use it on a regular basis. And we're talking about children with their parents and the grandparents. If we look at Ashton Court, there's roughly 850 acres on the site, and we're here talking about maybe 4.5 acres. That makes some money for the council. Not the other 840 acres that don't make much or actually lose money for the council. I was a bit surprised listening to the Mayor earlier when he said that the council takings dropped by £230 per day whenever on the 20 public running days. That equates to £4,600. I believe the charity have offered to pay more than that to the council as part of the new negotiations. But at the same time, we're failing to quantify the secondary gain via the cafe and the car park. And we also need to include the Santa Special, which is hugely popular in December, as you would expect, but you're getting thousands of people onto the site. That adds value. And speaking of value, 90 pence a ticket, great value. Last week, it was said to me that we are looking to embed social value in our procurement process. What is the social value of this organisation? How is it quantified? The autism-friendly days, the bringing together of people to social isolation, the intergenerational working and family time is spent. This is immeasurable. It's more than just the 20 public
30 seconds, Councillor Morris.
Okay, well, my youngest son said today that he loves the railway and he would be very sad if it closed. This view is shared not just by Joseph, but by his brothers, by his family, and by thousands of people in and around Bristol. So I would like to say thank you ever so much for what you've done over the last 109 years, and I wish you every luck, and I hope you stay on the site, and we as a group support the petition and what you're trying to achieve. Thank you.
And now for the Green Group, we have Councillor Comley, please.
I want to start by thanking the Bristol Society for Model and Experimental Engineers for bringing this petition and for the hours that they've put in over the years into creating the model railway at Ashton Court and to keeping a love of hands-on practical engineering alive in Bristol. Like a lot of other Bristol families, mine has enjoyed days out at Ashton Court and visits to the model railway. One particular occasion stands out in my mind. We were on the last ride of the day when the engineer driving the train that he himself had built decided he hadn't had quite enough of sharing his pride and joy with us and announced that he'd put too much coal in and was going to have to work the steam off. Ignoring the protests of the other volunteers, who I guess after a long day were ready to go home, off he tore for a couple of extra laps of the track with us all on board. It was so much fun. It was a little bit mad. It was also a little bit magical. And 10 years later, the memory of that is still bringing a smile to my face. So could that space make more money rented out to, I don't know, yet another bar or a big global coffee chain? Well, possibly, but right now we have something special, something that is not found on every street corner in the country. We know that the Parks Department is faced with the need to increase income and cut costs to survive within their much reduced budget. And I think all those who use our parks, from dog walkers to friends groups and from football teams to miniature railway engineers, understand this and are more than willing to do their part. However, as we saw with the previous drama over parks cafes, the way that the council approaches and attempts to work with stakeholders really matters. Trying to start discussions with a "we are kicking you out" email is perhaps not the best strategy to engender compromise and cooperation. So is there scope for improvement on the site? I'm sure there is. The idea of instituting charges for the overflow parking used on railway days sounds like an excellent start. And looking at ways we can work with the society to use the space around the railway to generate more income from this area of Ashton Court rather than encroaching further and further into the green space. Sounds sensible too. A cafe with exhibition space where people can still see the engines when they're not running, perhaps. I'm sure there are possibilities, but those will only come to light by working with people in the places that they love and care about. So that is the approach I would urge the council to take.
Thank you. And now, finally, Councillor Hopkins for the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just find it unbelievable with the huge problems that this council has to deal with, that the Mayor and his administration want to take on and bully an organisation like this that's costing this council nothing and is contributing to this city, the well-being of this city. Absolutely staggering. The way that it's been done, slashing away at this organisation, attacking them, has just been disgusting. I feel sorry for the frontline officers who've had to try and negotiate without being told what they're supposed to be negotiating and where they're supposed to end up, because their job has been impossible. But our friends here have been left in a totally impossible situation. The council does not collect the car parking charges properly, and they've been invited to do so, and the amount of car parking generated by the organisation is quite significant, but we need to be collecting that money and collecting it properly, and then having a proper audit on who these people are actually visiting, and therefore who's actually attracting the business to pay the parking charges. The other thing is that this group, as have amply demonstrated, have a wonderful following, a loyal following, people who have a huge amount of goodwill towards them. They could, in actual fact, make quite a lot of money from merchandising, you know, T-shirts, polo shirts, jigsaws, goodness knows what to do with the model, with the miniature railway, and they'd sell and in large numbers. But I'm afraid this council prevents that. They kicked Bristol in Bloom in the teeth when they prevented them from raising money in the way they traditionally raised it and made life almost impossible there. This organisation are happy to pay more rent. They're offering to pay more rent, and we could make a sensible rent from them if we allowed them to raise money in a way that's sensible for both ourselves and for that organisation, and all the children and the adults that they actually help. So for goodness sake, if you don't know how to do it, get out of the way and allow those who can negotiate and work with these residents to get on and do the job properly, because the approach at the moment has just been shocking. We will support you in every way that we possibly can, and I think you can see that that goes for the majority of councillors. So don't allow yourselves to be bullied any further. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm now going to call upon Cabinet Member and Deputy Mayor, Councillor Asher Craig, to respond at the end of this debate.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your statement. So it's no secret that the budget for parks and green spaces has reduced significantly, and in the decision that was made for the budget consultation, that we made it quite clear that we were looking for income generation opportunities to cover the costs of running our parks and green spaces, and that includes Ashton Court. And the miniature railway site is one of the sites that were being considered alongside a number of others. This is because it brings in very little money and the site does not currently pay for itself. However, let me repeat, no decision has been made, and officers are still working with the Bristol Society of Model and Experimental Engineers to try and find a solution that is acceptable to everyone. Current options that have been discussed include continuing to run the railway at Ashton Court using a new business model, or looking at opportunities to move the railway to other Bristol parks. Until a long-term solution is found, the council will negotiate the terms of a short-term lease with BSMEE. The Bristol Society of Model and Experimental Engineers currently hold a short-term lease, a 5-year short-term lease, on the site that is near the Golf Hub in Ashton Court Estate. The current 5-year lease expires in November 2018. The terms of the lease are very clear. There's no right to occupation of the site beyond the lease. Any investment in the site needs to be at the permission of the council. At the end of the term of the leaseholder, according to the current contract, should remove everything that's on site. There is no requirement on the council to relocate tenants when their lease expires, nor to pay any costs related in doing so. However, in this case, the council has offered assistance in identifying possible alternative sites on council land and possibly some limited financial assistance for a relocation as a goodwill gesture. This would be negotiated in discussion with BSME, but I understand all those options have been refused. Sites that we've discussed with the organisation include Blaze, Oldbury Court, Netham, Victoria Park. None were deemed suitable by the club. The council started talking to BSME about the lease much earlier this year to explore what their plans and future business model might be. BSME responded to say that they wanted to continue operating in the same way and were not looking to become more commercial and bring in any more money. We indicated that we needed to consider the future and we were looking for more income, but did not give notice at the time, and we wanted to brief members and find out more about what other options might be viable.
Deputy Mayor, we're going to have to draw the remarks to a close, please.
Having considered the options, officers met with the organisation in early July 2018 to inform you that the council was not looking to renew the lease on the site. But I do know that the officers continue to talk with yourselves about looking for a viable option, which may also include retaining the model railway on Ashton Court. So to kind of sum up, we have agreed to give an extension until the end of summer 2019 while we continue to talk with the organisation about the site. If we can come up with an alternative viable financial model, I have no problem with the railway being retained at Ashton Court, but it needs to wash its face. The cost of running Ashton Court is nearly £500,000 a year that we spend on that site, and we need to find ways in which it needs to wash its face. So we welcome continued discussions with the organisation and hope to reach a conclusion sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Would the petition organisers like a chance to respond to that briefly? Where's the mic? If we can just allow a minute for the response, please, and then we're going to move on.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I welcome and thank the Council for the opportunity to have this debate. and I'm very pleased to hear, broadly speaking, a huge amount of support for us. I do take some exception to some of the comments made by the Deputy Mayor, because I think they are ill-informed and inaccurate, but I will look forward to speaking further with representatives of the Parks Department as soon as possible to try and make some progress in a constructive way. So I thank the Council generally and broadly speaking for their engagement this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I now ask the Council to note the issues raised in the petition, together with the comments of members during this debate at this meeting, which will now be referred to the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor for Communities for consideration, and there will be a response back to the petition organiser. So that concludes agenda item number 8. So we now move on, ahead of our break, to agenda item number 9, which is the appointment of Monitoring Officer, Electoral Registration Officer and Returning Officer. No, we're going to break after this next item, agenda item number 9. Okay, it shouldn't take long at all. So as Lord Mayor, I move the report, and can I please ask Councillor Leslie Alexander, Deputy Lord Mayor, to second the report, please?
Seconded, reserving my remarks.
Thank you very much. I would like to move to the vote on the report recommendation as set out. So all those members in favour, please say aye. Aye. And all those against, please say no. Thank you. That report is therefore approved, and that concludes agenda item 9. And at this point, we will take a 20-minute break, so we'll be back just after 8 o'clock. Thank you. So let's get ready to start again. Thank you. So moving on now to agenda item number 10, which is the motions. And can I remind members that all speeches should last no more than 3 minutes, and I'm happy to give you a 1-minute warning if you wish. In terms of electronic votes, once I call a vote, you will have the usual 15 seconds to vote before the vote closes. 30 minutes are formally permitted for motions. Once 30 minutes has passed, if the consideration of motions is to extend beyond 30 minutes, full council will need to agree to extend time. Okay, so let's go to motion 1. This is regarding the council enforcement policy towards illegal encampments, and it is the Conservative group's golden motion. So please can I ask Councillor Galandris from the Conservatives to move the motion, please?
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. This motion is about fairness and justice. If a law-abiding, hard-working Bristol council taxpayer parks their caravan on Horfield Common, the authorities would remove it immediately. If Councillor Weston left a pile of litter at Blaze, he would quite rightly be prosecuted. And since last November, 8,000 people in Bristol have been fined for littering. If Councillor Radford were to fly tip on the Downs, she would face a potential jail sentence. Bristolians are getting increasingly angry that the rules which apply to them don't for some reason apply to travellers who illegally occupy the city's green spaces and prevent local families from using them. The police wash their hands, and the council, rather than prosecuting travellers for littering and fly tipping, actually use Bristol Council taxpayers' money to clean up the mess. No attempt whatsoever is made by the council to recoup either the clean-up or legal costs. Bristol, regrettably, has acquired the reputation of being a soft touch. Other local authorities have adopted a better approach to dealing with illegal traveller incursions by seeking blanket injunctions. This greatly reduces the amount of time travellers can spend in an illegal encampment and thereby makes trespass in that locality much less attractive and hence much less likely. I would ask the Mayor to adopt a similar approach in Bristol so that next summer Bristolians can enjoy our much-loved green spaces without restriction. The Republic of Ireland has gone further by passing national legislation which has made deliberate trespass a criminal offence. This has seen a massive reduction in illegal traveller incursions. 59 British MPs have written to the Prime Minister seeking a similar change to English law. Such a change in the law would save Bristol thousands of pounds each year, and I urge the Mayor to add his support for a change in the law. To be clear, this motion is not an attack on travellers or travelling as a lifestyle. In my youth, I spent time travelling, initially using tents and later camper vans. But at no time did I trespass, drop litter, or fly tip. I used approved sites, which had the added benefit of providing washing and toilet facilities. Travelling does not necessitate breaking the law. That's a conscious choice. At its time, we responded robustly to illegal behaviour. In summary, I believe passionately in a free society, and I have no issue with those who believe in a just society. The law is applied impartially, sine timore aut favore, without your favour. The public's perception is that Bristol has been far too soft when dealing with illegal traveller incursions. Let's fix that. Please support this motion and let's take back control of our public open spaces. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I please ask Councillor Hiscott to second the motion?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I stand to second the motion. I was elected as a councillor for Horfield in 2013, and ever since I've been part of the annual cycle of managing caravan travellers staying on Horfield Common. Many other councillors, I'm sure, can relate to my experiences, because many times each year we go through this process. A few large caravans arrive on the common, and my phone starts ringing as residents report it. I contact the council, traveller offices and the police, both visit the site, and the slow legal process starts. but more large caravans arrive and vehicles, 4, 10, 12, 14 last time. My phone is quite rightly red hot now, and even the adjacent leisure centre now starts to have problems. The rubbish starts to build up, and local families stop using the play area. Then I get the serious incident phone call, and the most upsetting for me was when a child and mother were nearly hit by a speeding van on the green. Now that type of serious incident, of which there have been many, leads to police action, or the legal papers eventually come through and the caravans go and the clean-up begins. Gradually, families come back to the green until the next time. It's an unmerry dance, costing the police and council time and money and the community much upset. Now, let me be clear. I respect the lifestyle and culture of the travelling community, which is why I fully support council's designated traveller sites with proper facilities, access to health checks and education. But I also respect and support the rights of Bristol families to free and safe access to their green spaces. Currently, I think as a council, we are letting them down. So we have, as I see it, 3 choices. 1, do nothing. It's an option. 2, physically prevent access by bouldering or ditches. Very expensive, damaging and nearly impossible on the Downs and on Horfield Common. And it also limits legitimate access for fun days, concerts, fetes, etc. Or 3, learn from others and legislate. The IRA model has been hugely effective, allows the travelling community free movement and has kept open spaces accessible and safe. So I support exploring option 3, a change in the legislation, because I value the safety of Bristol families and their right to enjoy our parks without hesitation or hindrance. And if you do too, then I would ask you to support this motion.
So we're going to open out the debate now, and I'm going to go to Councillor Pickersgill for Labour. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm rising to oppose this motion because I think it's ill-informed, it's deliberately inflammatory, bordering on discriminatory, and it's an attempt at political expediency. I can't help but think of Alderwoman Jenny Smith and what she would say, because she championed these issues for decades. The motion refers all the way through to travellers as though they're a homogenous group, and I know we all in this chamber, I hope, know that we have Roma, we have Gypsy, we have Irish travellers who have a proud history in this city, but we also have other groups. So we have van dwellers more recently, we have new travellers, and they've got very different needs and backgrounds and different reasons for their lifestyle, and they're not actually entitled to use the authorised sites, and nowhere is that mentioned. Of course, we don't agree with having unauthorised sites on our parks and our school playing fields, and we do need to protect them, and we do need to take prompt enforcement action. But this motion won't do anything to help that. And I take great exception to the phrase hard-working, law-abiding, tax-paying Bristolians, as though it implies to everyone other than travellers. They're also part of that group. Many of our traveller families have lived in Bristol and surrounding areas for generations. They work extremely hard. They do pay taxes, many of them. They work in physically demanding roles, and they do abide by the law. We can't categorise a whole group in any way. Gypsy, Roma and travellers were named in many reports as one of our most disadvantaged groups. They've got low outcomes in education, high infant and maternal mortality rates, lower life expectancy, high prevalence of anxiety and depression, and other health indicators. They deliberately seek out places where they feel safe because they're regularly targets of crime and attacks. Nationally, the number of authorised sites has actually gone up, but not in the mainly Tory-controlled areas. Unauthorised sites are only 16% of caravans last year, and the numbers are actually going down. The real question for me is whether our provision is adequate. So we've got 20 transit pitches and 12 permanent pitches, but as I say, they're only available to certain groups. Our last Travellers' Need Assessment says we need another 24 pitches by 2028. That's not a huge demand. And I wonder over the decades that's how that small additional need could have been met, and how many councillors in the party opposite have offered pieces of land in their ward for sites to accommodate those 24 extra sites. We've already got a wide range of powers. We've got a GRT team in the council who work very well with the police, but they do their enforcement based on looking at people's housing, their health and their welfare needs, which is what any reasonable, humane council would do. You mentioned the Irish situation. Yes, they have brought in criminal trespass laws, but that's in conjunction with more statutory requirements for local authorities to provide sites for travellers. We know that the Commission for Racial Equality said gypsies and travellers are the last respectable form of racism, and we all need to be very mindful not to add to the prevalent myths and stereotypes and bias and downright lies propagated by parts of the media scapegoating this group. To sum up, we see the GRT community as an important part of our inclusive city, support their right to maintain their travelling lifestyle, and we will listen to them and work with them along with SARI. However, rather than lobbying for more potentially discriminatory enforcement powers, and the injunctions the London boroughs are looking at may well be illegal and haven't yet been tested, we'd ask the government to restore the funding for local authorities for new and refurbished sites.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up now, I'm afraid.
To give adequate funding incentives and legal powers to secure affordable housing, and most importantly, to end austerity, which is what's led to the reduction in our capacity to move on unauthorised encampments quickly in a compassionate and humane way.
Thank you. Okay, and now over to the Green Group, and we have Councillor O'Rourke, who's going to put her argument across.
I rise, and I'm going to oppose this motion as well. And I was going to talk about opposing it on content and on style. Ruth, you said a lot of what I was going to say about the style, because I do think the language is quite loaded. I think the whole thing about exasperated taxpayers of Bristol not having unfettered access to the commons and things is very loaded language. But I actually do really want to talk more about the content of it. I think it's very dangerous to ask to criminalise trespass. At the moment, if we decide to go onto a site where it says trespassers will be prosecuted, we won't be prosecuted. It's misleading. It's a civil matter. It's a matter of tort. We're not going to be criminalised for it. But if you bring in this criminalisation, then I'm not sure that you've really considered the unforeseen consequences of it. If, for example, I just decide I want to go off and do some wild camping, or it could happen to anybody here, that we would find ourselves at danger of loss of liberty. And that's a huge, heavy stick to deal with the problem. I think also, you talk about, sweeping injunctions against whole authorities, and that really caused me concern, because I think, again, it's very dangerous to think about shunning people and banishing people with such sweeping manners. And also, when travellers or caravans do arrive here, Bristol City Council representatives go and speak to them, and they ask them why they're here. They also use it as an opportunity under the Human Rights Act to seek about the welfare of children, whether they're going to school, whether people are ill. I know a couple of years ago there was a large incursion of travellers here, and they were only here for a few weeks while an aged person was dying in the BRI. And I think we should have enough humanity to be able to tolerate things like that. And perhaps what we should be doing is going up there and putting up portaloos like they do in Scotland and helping people to engage and be part of our community instead of isolating them. And you talk about this place, Éire. Well, I don't know where that is. It's not somewhere that I'm from. I'm from Ireland. It hasn't been Éire since 1949. And I think actually the whole thing about the motion seems to be a bit regressive and backward-looking. I'm sorry that it's not much more progressive-looking. And in Ireland, they did bring in laws to criminalise trespassers, but it came from a different origin. I don't have enough time to explain it. But also, I think it's interesting that travellers are not protected minorities in Ireland. They don't have protected characteristics, so it's a very different issue. So I think it's a sledgehammer. I don't think it's something that we would be able to support. I do think it is got sort of the dog whistle of racism about it. I liked Ruth's quote about I liked Ruth's quote about being the last respectable type of discrimination, because it is. No, I think it's there too. So, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hopkins for the Liberal Democrats, please.
Thank you. Yes, I remember some years ago, we were held up by the LGA as an example of how to do things properly when it came to travellers. And in particular, I remember we published a Mythbusters leaflet, and in that actually talked about the racism against gypsies seeming to be the only racism that people thought was okay still. Well, it isn't okay, and I deplore the tone of this motion. Unfortunately, I think there are others in politics at the moment who think that racism against other groups are okay because it doesn't count as racism. That's not true either. And I think there are some people who need to have words with their MPs. I do support being able to move people off land quickly if they're causing a difficulty. A more efficient use of the powers that are available. We don't need new legislation, we don't need extra criminalisation, whatever, but more efficient use of the powers that are there would be welcome in a number of cases. Having said that, if we had listened to the Conservatives some years ago, we wouldn't have a site that people could be moved to. We wouldn't have a site where we can actually say, by the way, there it is, there's somewhere to go. Because before we got those sites, it was almost impossible to get anybody moved off land at all, because the courts quite rightly said, where are they going to go? So basically, we provided the sites, and I don't disagree that we might need to put another site in somewhere. And it's noticeable that the motion actually talks about the large cost of running the sites. Well, in actual fact, as we found out, they were rather embarrassed to find out from the question earlier on, the site down at Lawrence Weston doesn't cost very much at all, and it's actually covered by the fees paid by the people using it. So that's not a hugely costly facility, is it? And I think that we need to take account and get the right balance between those people who want to use their parks, want to have full access to them, and the needs and wants of those other people who are there temporarily. We need to make certain there's a humane and sensible way of moving them on to somewhere where they can be looked after, their children can be assessed and helped, not just shouting at them and saying, go away somewhere else. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we've had a speaker from each party. Do you still require to have a second speaker, some of the parties? No? We do. You do. Anyone else? Okay, fine. So can we just have a bit of respect, please? So to clarify, it's only the Labour who would like to have a second speaker on this. Are you sure? Fine. Okay. Okay, noted. Okay, so we'll move to Councillor Bradley, please, then, for Labour.
In his wonderful book, Songlines, about the Australian Aboriginal people, Bruce Chatwin describes how the First Nations were all nomadic. They lived off the land and had a special understanding of it and saw themselves as caretakers. From their point of view, we, settled populations, with our private property, our laws, our bureaucracies, have actually stolen the land and their rights to it from them, as is now widely acknowledged in Australia. Chatwin also stresses how states have always resented nomads, trying to force them into settlements, as has happened with Roma in many parts of Europe, and roused resentment against them by negative stereotyping. Let us not collude with that negative stereotyping. In the UK, Roma and Irish travellers are distinct ethnic groups protected under the Equality Act. The last census recorded 58,000 in England and Wales. As my colleague has said, reports show that they suffer multiple inequalities and particularly high levels of racism, hate crime and exclusion. Alongside those groups in Bristol, as Councillor Pickersbill has explained, there are other types of travellers, fairground people, new age travellers, van dwellers, who for various reasons may be homeless. Numbers in caravans are indeed growing, given Tory-promoted austerity and its impacts. So Bristol may very well need to increase its provision to cater for their needs. And it's important that we offer them pleasant sites, which may be why they go onto parks rather than the places they're meant to. So Bristol needs to give pleasant sites with appropriate facilities rather than brutally trying to drive them out. I agree that council and police should try to deal promptly with illegal encampments, but as Ruth has said, in fact, over the last 10 years, illegal site camping have fallen by 7%. Please remember, everybody, these are human beings with needs like us who have chosen a different lifestyle. Why not enter dialogue with them instead of trying to penalise them? In fact, over their lifetimes, they're likely to cause a lot less environmental destruction to our fragile planet than us buzzing about in our fast cars, our aeroplanes, and our compulsive consumerism. When I came to Bristol as a young woman, I fell in love with its quirkiness and openness to difference and non-conformity. We prize our city as inclusive, a place of sanctuary. Let us not add to the persecution of a particularly vulnerable minority by advocating greater legal sanctions against them. Show humanity and reject this intolerant motion.
Thank you. So before we go to the electronic vote, I'm going to go back to the mover of the motion to
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
respond.
There's a lot of confusion here. It's nothing to do with racism. It's about people who are not adhering to the law of this country. It's very different. There is no issue with people who want to travel. I said that in my statement. It's about people who break the law. It's about criminality. But anyhow, Ruth, let me answer your point. Would we welcome more trans? Well, we would, but as 50% using the King's Weston site. No problem providing more pitches, but can we get King's Weston used a bit more? 50% occupancy is a little bit on the low side, I would suggest. Paula, accidental trespass is very different from deliberate trespass. This is exactly what the law change is proposing. Deliberate trespass, very different from accidental trespass. I have to say, I could talk for a long time. I won't, because there's another very important motion that needs to come through. But I have to stress that there clearly is a difference of opinion, and we're very happy to test the difference of opinion with Bristolians.
Right. Okay. Okay, so we will now move to the vote, which will be an electronic vote. And I will just note as well that in the public forum, we didn't have people. Thank you. And if we can encourage people to put statements in, we had a number of statements, but unfortunately the people weren't here to read them. So that's what I would encourage at this stage. So let's go to the vote now. So standing by, please can you vote now? Okay. That motion is lost. So I'm going to have to ask permission for extra time because we're pretty much at the 30 minutes allocated for motions. So we have 7 minutes outstanding, and I'd like to add another 15 on top of that. Could we agree to that, please? Anyone against? Good, so let's move on.
Sorry, my Lord Mayor, I realise that the vote has gone, but do we actually need 15 to do it? Okay.
We might do, so I think it's better to have enough. We've just spent 25 minutes plus on this one. So let's go to the next motion, which is an altered motion, and it's about the special educational needs and disability. So I'm going to ask Councillor Kent from the Liberal Democrats to move the altered motion, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I move the altered motion that has been sent to councillors electronically, and members of the public should have hard copies in the gallery. Firstly, thank you to the parents, the ones that are here, the ones that were in court, the ones that struggle with fighting for their children's rights day in and day out, sometimes for years. We should not be here, but we are. Parents and children should not have been denied their lawful rights, but they have. Funding should have been provided to meet needs, but it hasn't. That is the past. That is our present. Let us today agree that it will not be the future for children with special education needs and disabilities here in our city. The motion lays out the bare facts. We have failed to meet needs. We have failed in our legal and statutory duties. We looked to reduce funding in an unlawful way. In our city, schools have increasingly seen the funding for children reduced. Top-up funding has been slashed, and that has had a significant negative impact on children and schools. There is no doubt that an increase in demand, diagnosis and rights has led to greater pressure on a budget that has not received sufficient funding to meet this. But lack of funding cannot be an excuse for not meeting statutory requirements. We would not tolerate it in other areas of the council. If we pass this motion, we accept that we need to do better. We send a signal to parents and their children that we are on their side and that we will work collaboratively rather than combatively in the future. Let us agree that we will avoid the horrendous situation where we have officers, council officers, on behalf of children in care, fighting legal cases against education officers just to secure the rights to an inclusive education for those children that we are all corporate parents for. I think the Cabinet made a catastrophic mistake in January in agreeing such large cuts to send. Let us not fool ourselves, though. We all made that mistake. None of us noticed at the time. Thankfully, a small group of parents were more diligent, and their action has given us all a second chance. So let us embrace that chance. I welcome that an action plan to address outcomes for SEND is being put in place, and I hope that all councillors will be updated regularly on that. The establishment of a scrutiny task and finish group on this topic is welcome and a positive step, and I look forward to seeing their recommendations. We need a clear action plan from Cabinet for the funding of the high needs budget, and we set a time frame by which that should be delivered. We are agreeing a call on government to provide the funding that this service needs. I suggest that could be a letter from the Mayor and all group leaders to the Prime Minister, Minister and party leaders in Westminster. I ask that you support this motion today and send a positive signal across our city and across the country on this issue. Thank you.
Now may I ask Councillor Keane for Labour to second the altered motion, please?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can I just say before I begin, thank you to the parents who've come along this evening. I realise some of you commented on how nervous you were speaking, so thank you so much for doing that. I appreciate that's not the easiest thing to turn out and do. I'm rising to second this motion, and I'm doing so, although it's not a motion
motion from my political party, but because it's my firm belief that this is not an issue that anyone should seek to score political points over. It concerns how we best serve our children and our young people in Bristol with special educational needs and disabilities. These are some of our most vulnerable, yet as this case shows, indeed this evening shows, the most resilient families in our city who have so much to offer, and I want to underline my commitment to these families today. When news around issues such as the loss of a judicial review hit the headlines, as a politician and perhaps just as a human, you can very much fill in the line of fire, and it is an easy, sometimes instinctive reaction to throw our hands in the air, to blame others, whether that's the government or previous administrations or officers you work with. However, I will accept today that no one forced me to be a councillor or a cabinet member, and I will therefore not shy away from accepting the role that I play in getting this right. It is true, as Councillor Kent has said, that nationally we have an unprecedented funding shortage in SEND, and in my 17 years in teaching, I have never known school budgets to be so stretched. The £5 million savings will put in place to bring a £7 million overspend back on track, and I do appreciate that we do have to seek to manage what finances we have responsibly for the future security of our children in the city. But let me be clear, we did not appreciate the need to consult fully, even at a very early stage when the details of saving plans were not in place. Even though we would have done that at a later stage, what this review has taught us, and however difficult this is for all of us, particularly me to hear, is that our prioritisation of equalities, specifically the way in which we assess the impact of our decisions, must be better, right from day one, and I can assure you that going forward it will be. I also appreciate that we could have been clearer in the way we publicised our proposals, and I'd like to make the following points clear today. First of all, we accept the judge's findings, and we will not seek to appeal these in any way. We will seek to reset the high needs block budget, and we will propose no savings against the high needs block for this financial year. This will go to Cabinet in October, and I'll take to full council in November. In addition, we will ask Council to approve putting £2.7 million back into this budget. This will be a transfer of £2 million from elsewhere in the schools budget, with £700,000 from our Council's general fund. The Council has already agreed this in principles with schools and has special permission from the Secretary of State to do so. I will point out the government only allow us to do that on one occasion, so we will obviously have to look to what comes next after that. We need to look to the 2019 to 20 budget as well, and setting this will be challenging, but it will take place with equality at its absolute core and with proper consideration given to all whom any potential changes will impact on. There will also be very detailed and much more user-friendly guide for families, for schools, for all professionals involved in the process around the funding of SEND, which I hope will seek to address some of the issues that you've raised and the challenges you've all faced this evening. I will close by just sharing that I have some personal experience in my family of the challenges to daily life that special educational needs and disabilities bring. I also teach children every week who have experience of those challenges. There are others amongst us I know who will know firsthand how challenging daily life can be. This judicial review was brought against us as a whole organisation, and it is down to each of us to respond in whatever role we play here. For me, I will strive to uphold our values of fairness and this administration's unwavering ambition to support those who need it most in our city. And I ask my fellow councillors in the chamber to show their support by voting for this motion tonight.
So now we move to our other speakers, and we go to Councillor Carey for the Conservative Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I rise on behalf of my colleagues to support this motion. There's no doubt that the recent High Court judgment was not only an embarrassment for the Council, exposing a failure of process and a duty to consult, it also showed major failings in the budget setting procedure, but I think that has been amply covered by the two previous speakers. So I'm not going to dwell on it. I'm only too familiar with the difficulties, both practical and financial, of financial regarding children with special needs in terms of diagnosis, the increased complexity of cases, and the rising demand for tailored support and the ever-increasing costs. What I'd like to say also is that members obviously will recognise that there is no bottomless pit, and although I'm sure if people were asked, they would probably choose to preserve this service over other parts of the education budget. In this particular case, the High Court found that Bristol City Council had acted unlawfully in seeking to make the £5 million savings, and due to failure to consult with those parents and young people in receipt of the benefit before the decision in reduced funding was discussed and voted on at the budget fixing meeting in February. The court ruled that this was a breach of various acts of Parliament governing towards children equalities legislation, including the production of an impact assessment and a common law duty of fairness. I don't think no one in the chamber will disagree with the principle stated in the motion that every child is entitled to inclusive education where their needs will be met and they have full access to the curriculum. It's part of the UNESCO statement that those with special educational needs must have access to regular schools, which should accommodate them with child-centred pedagogy, capable of meeting those. It's not a word you use in Bridgington very often. It's also true, though, that the achievement gaps for disadvantaged children in Bristol are unacceptably high and appear to be widening, therefore tending to suggest that more resources are needed to tackle this shortcoming rather than introduce a significant cut. My personal experiences from speaking with head teachers at directors' forums, whatever the plural of forums is, find that the bureaucratic marathon involved and the financial payment in claiming for a Band 3 child hardly worth the hassle. Head teachers find or believe that they are left on their own, and there appears to be little support to call upon when facing these huge challenges on their resources, practical and financial. Also, while the Mayor maintained what we called a rainbow cabinet, he already had good access to the to national government. In fact, our colleague, Councillor Claire Hiscott, had been in face-to-face talks with both Nick Gibbs, Minister for Schools, and Justin Green, the Education Minister.
I'm going to have to ask you to sum up now, please.
About the very funding of about the very issue of fund sending, the issue of send funding. And so for this reason, I and my Conservative colleagues back the proposal for a new action plan to support the educational outcome for children with special needs.
Thank you. And over to Councillor Thomas for the Green Party.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm rising to support this motion on behalf of the Green Group of councillors. First of all, thank you to Councillor Kent for bringing the motion and to Councillor Keane for the sort of level of commitment that you're showing in getting things right from here on in. What's happened with our approach to special education needs and disability provision, and what should we do next? The Council appears to be letting down and have let down some of the most vulnerable children in our city who need a high level of additional support to either allow them to continue in mainstream education or need specialist education to serve their needs adequately. It's doing this by failing to assess the needs in a timely fashion, communicating poorly with them and their parents or carers, and then potentially failing to provide the educational support that they're legally entitled to. The Council has then failed to consult on proposed spending levels with potentially affected groups and individuals who might reasonably expect to be consulted with. How can the Council avoid losing legal cases like the most recent one? And more importantly, how can we get our services and approach right for the children with these special needs? In terms of avoiding legal cases like this, it's unfortunate that the adults, children and education scrutiny responsible for scrutinising this area has not met once in the last year. It's possible that these difficulties could have been avoided if adequate scrutiny had been taking place. Let's make sure that scrutiny is meeting at the right frequencies in the future so that we can try and deal with problems before they happen rather than after they happen. However, we do now have a task with Finish Group that is going to look at our SEND provision. We need to ensure that we're learning from what's gone wrong with our current SEND approach and get the terms of reference right for this task of Finish Group so that our proposed action plan is what we need. In particular, we need to ensure that children, their parents and carers who are approaching the Council for assessments and support feel that their requests are being listened to and dealt with fairly and respectfully. We need to ensure that we're adequately monitoring our assessments and the backlog of assessments. And then we need to look at improvements in the ways that spending in this area is proposed and managed, while at the same time making sure that we're acting fairly and legally. We recognise the level of pressure that SEND is under. It's a complex area, demands are rising, and we should learn from this to try and avoid making similar mistakes in the future. I ask you to support the motion.
Thank you. So we'll just go back to Councillor Kent now to respond as the mover for the motion. Thank you.
Let's just go to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will now go to the vote on the altered motion, and this will be an electronic vote. So if you're ready, please can you vote now? The motion is carried. Thank you. So that leaves us with my calculations of 5.5 minutes. So shall we debate the third motion on airport expansion? I think we have to call it a night for tonight. Thank you. So thank you to everyone. That concludes tonight's meeting.